Good morning and a good Father's Day. I am Kathy Crane, a member of UUFC. Each week, this community comes together to participate in worship, music, and reflection. We come here to have our hearts opened and our imaginations fired. Here, we are reminded that we are deeply connected to one another and to all living things. Even though our beautiful building remains closed for Sunday services, we gather together for weekly virtual service. Social time is available through Zoom at 11:30 this morning, with the link available through last Thursday's emailed weekly connection. May this find you well, living cautiously and reaching out to our community with any needs and joys you might care to share. If you are visiting with us today, please take a look at the fellowship's website found at uufc.org for more information. We encourage visitors to consider involvement with our worship, our community, our social time. This fellowship is a religious community grounded in the heritage and principles of Unitarian Universalism. We'll be talking about the principles a good bit today. The Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Clemson, UUFC, seeks to create a beloved community to inspire joy and spiritual growth and to encourage courageous action. All are welcome. Our weekly emailed newsletter can guide you to get connected to our community for online social events such as the Thursday evening bingo, the Wednesday afternoon coffee with Christina, and the twice monthly meditation with Jean. The weekly newsletter also shares our joys and concerns and our collective efforts to support local social justice work. Please reach out to the office by the email on UUFC's website to receive this emailed newsletter. You might even see pictures from last week's UUFC campout at Oconee State Park, a fine annual tradition for our community. And finally, donations to help with the work of UUFC can be made through the donate button on the website. Thank you for your contributions to UUFC and to this month's benevolence, Ripple of One. Thank you for being a part of the UUFC community. The opening reading comes from the words of Lorraine Botteriff McNeil, empowering the fathers of this world. Today is Father's Day, a day in which we honor and offer gratitude for our fathers in whatever form or fashion they come into our lives. Biological fathers, stepfathers, adoptive and foster fathers, grandfathers, spiritual fathers, and of all the uncles, brothers, and friends who, whether they know it or not, have helped to fill the role of father in someone's life. We are shaped by their presence and their absence, by how they choose to act and when they abstain, what they say and when they remain silent. Let us remember today and always the impact that these people have on us as individuals and as a community. And let us also remember that this relationship is not one-sided, and that we as a community are called to support and empower the fathers of this world, no matter how they came into their roles and regardless of their relative successes or failures. Let us raise up their triumphs and let us have the grace to forgive them their all too human failures. Let us love our fathers and each other. Come, let us worship together.
Gathered here in the mystery of the hour, gathered here in one strong body, gathered here in the struggle and
Now I'm going to light my candle and invite you to light a candle if you have one handy at home. And these are the words for the chalice lighting. We gather together in a spirit of love, with justice as our guide. This is our covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth with freedom, and to care for one another. We will use this flame to light these candles for our joys and concerns. First, a celebration to the change of seasons, from spring to the summer solstice tomorrow. Perhaps you would like to join Jean's virtual meditation tomorrow evening to celebrate summer. This second candle is lit in recognition of the work of UUFC's Reentry Committee. It is indeed a joy to be making plans to reopen our beautiful building. And thirdly, let us honor the work of our communities who provided events to recognize Juneteenth yesterday. The next one. Here is a candle to celebrate the social time we have together, ranging from last weekend's annual UUFC campout at Oconee State Park, to our covenant groups, to the variety of virtual gatherings that UUFC offers to provide opportunities for us to gather in many ways, including at 11:30 this morning. UUFC also provides ritual for us to honor our departed, our grieving, and those among us who need support. Finally, we recognize joys and concerns that you experience. Please remember that you are not alone.
Good morning. It's good to be with you all again. Today, our friend Kathy is going to talk to us about possibly adding an 8th principle to the list of the 7 that we as Unitarian Universalists recognize now. These principles help us to explain to others and to ourselves how we as UUs should treat others and what we believe to be important. Right now, I'd like to ask you to think about 2 of our current 7 principles. The first one, that we believe that each and every person is important, and the 7th one, that all living things are connected in a web of life. The first principle helps us to understand how people who are different from us deserve to be treated fairly and equally. It also tells us that different people make different kinds of families, and that all families are special. The 7th principle helps us to remember that all living things should be treated with kindness and respect. Have you ever watched one of those baby cams from a zoo, like the baby giraffes that have been born up at the Greenville Zoo? It's fun, isn't it? And I think one of the things that we like about those videos is how they show us just how much animal families can love each other, just like human families. The story that Kathy asked me to share with you today is, I think, a very good example of these ideas. It's about 2 penguins in a zoo who cared about each other very much and wanted a family. And it's also a wonderful way to wish all the fathers out there a happy Father's Day.
And Tango Makes 3 by Justin Richardson and Peter Parnell, illustrated by Henry Cole. In the middle of New York City, there is a great big park called Central Park. Children love to play there. It has a toy boat pond where they can sail their boats. It has a carousel to ride on in the summer and an ice rink to skate on in the winter. Best of all, it has its very own zoo. Every day, families of all kinds go to visit the animals that live there. But children and their parents aren't the only families at the zoo. The animals make families of their own. There are red panda bear families with mothers and fathers and furry red panda bear cubs. There are monkey dads and monkey moms raising noisy monkey babies. There are toad families and toucan families and cotton-top tamarin families too. And in the penguin house, there are penguin families. Every year, at the very same time, the girl penguins start noticing the boy penguins, and the boy penguins start to notice the girls. When the right girl and the right boy find each other, they become a couple. Two penguins in the penguin house were a little bit different. One was named Roy, and the other was named Silo. Roy and Silo were both boys, but they did everything together. They bowed to each other and walked together. They sang to each other and swam together. Wherever Roy went, Silo went too. They didn't spend much time with the girl penguins, and the girl penguins didn't spend much time with them. Instead, Roy and Silo wound their necks around each other. Their keeper, Mr. Gramsci, noticed the two penguins and thought to himself, "They must be in love." Roy and Silo watched how the other penguins made a home, so they built a nest of stones for themselves. Every night, Roy and Silo slept there together, just like the other penguin couples. And every morning, Roy and Silo woke up together. But one day, Roy and Silo saw that the other couples could do something they could not. The mama penguin would lay an egg. She and the papa penguin would take turns keeping the egg warm until finally it would hatch, and then there would be a baby penguin. Roy and Silo had no egg to sit on and keep warm. They had no baby chick to feed and cuddle and love. Their nest was nice, but it was a little empty. One day, Roy found something that looked like what the other penguins were hatching, and he brought it to their nest. It was only a rock, but Silo carefully sat on it, and sat, and sat. When Silo got sleepy, he slept, and when Silo was done sleeping and sitting, he swam and Roy sat. Day after day, Silo and Roy sat on the rock. But nothing happened. Then Mr. Gramsci got an idea. He found an egg that needed to be cared for, and he brought it to Roy and Silo's nest. Roy and Silo knew just what to do. They moved the egg to the center of their nest. Every day they turned it so each side stayed warm. Some days Roy sat while Silo went for food. Other days it was Silo's turn to take care of the egg. They sat in the morning and they sat at night. They sat through lunchtime and swim time and supper. They sat at the beginning of the month and they sat at the end of the month and sat all the days in between. Until one day they heard a sound coming from inside the egg. Peep, 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 it said. Roy and Silo called back, squawk, squawk. Peep, peep, answered the egg. Suddenly, a tiny hole appeared in the egg's shell. And then, crack! Out came their very own baby. She had fuzzy white feathers and a funny black beak. Now Roy and Silo were fathers. We'll call her Tango, Mr. Gramsci decided, because it takes two to make a tango. Roy and Silo taught Tango how to sing for them when she was hungry. They fed her food from their beaks. They snuggled her in their nest at night. Tango was the very first penguin in the zoo to have two daddies. Soon, Tango grew strong enough to leave the nest. Roy and Silo took her for a swim, just like all the other penguin families. And all the children who came to the zoo could see Tango and her two fathers playing in the penguin house with the other penguins. "Hooray, Roy! Hooray, Silo! Welcome, Tango!" they cheered. At night, 3 penguins returned to their nest. There they snuggled together and, like all the other penguins in the penguin house and all the other animals in the zoo and all the families in the big city around them, they went to sleep. And here is an actual picture of Roy and Silo, the penguins in our story today.
Bright morning stars are rising. Bright morning stars are rising. Bright morning stars are rising. Day is breaking in my soul. Oh, where are our dear fathers? Oh, where are our dear fathers? They are in the valley of praying. Day is breaking in my soul. Oh, where are our dear mothers? Oh, where are our dear mothers? They are gone to heaven, a shout shouting. Day is breaking in my soul. Bright morning stars are rising. Bright morning stars are rising. Bright morning stars are rising. Day is breaking in my soul.
UUFC's first settled minister, Reverend Cynthia Prescott, brought the term beloved community into my awareness. This term was actually coined by philosopher Josiah Royce in the early 20th century. He spoke of beloved community as that community worthy of our ultimate loyalty, what he called the loyalty of loyalties. Unlike partial communities that seek to put limits around love or duty, the beloved community is that community that keeps drawing the circle wider and wider still. It is a loyalty that is based not in our sameness, but to the love that holds us across our differences. To call this love holy, to pledge our allegiance to it. Grounding our understanding of beloved community in Royce's original ideas of loyalty reminds us that the heart of beloved community is not a belief in an idea, but a steadfast, unshakable commitment, a tough love, an action, a collection of actions. Martin Luther King Jr. was very clear that beloved community is possible in this life, but it is only possible when a critical mass of people make this commitment based on an understanding of what it means to be loyal to this love. This commitment is what drives the proposal for an eighth principle. Because our principles are the covenant we make as Unitarian Universalists, our promises to ourselves, to one another, and to life itself. The eighth principle says, we commit our loyalty to the building of the beloved community and our loyalty to the love that binds us each to all, the love that meets us across all of our beautiful diversity. UUFC's second settled minister, Reverend Terry Bailoff, gave me this eighth principle banner displayed behind me upon her departure. We never had a conversation about it, and I had not yet heard about this proposal, even though the UUA has been discussing it for 2 years now. It is the only principle starting with a gerund, encouraging action. Do you think the eighth principle is worthy of UUFC's adoption? This is the beginning of the process to ask you to gather your thoughts about having this principle become a part of who we are at UUFC. Black Lives of UU, called Blue, encourages all Unitarian Universalists to advocate for the formal adoption of an eighth principle, articulating a commitment to the dismantling of white supremacy within the stated principles of our faith. There is an ongoing study commission working to revise Article 2 of the UUA bylaws, which includes the principles, sources, and purposes of the UUA. It expresses the covenant that our congregations make to each other as part of the UUA. When the General Assembly gathers next week, still virtually, there will be study commissions engaging groups and individuals in conversation about our values and purposes as an organization and as a faith community. By the way, did you know that Stacey Abrams is going to be one of the presenters at the Ware Lecture during the virtual General Assembly? Also, at the General Assembly, a draft of the new statement for Article 2 will be presented to the 2022 General Assembly in Portland. So this conversation is ongoing. But we do not have to wait for this drafted new statement in order to adopt the eighth principle for UUFC. Many congregations have already taken this step of discussion and adoption. Paula Cole Jones was the director of racial and social justice for the UUA until last June 2020. She developed an idea of the existence of two different paradigms in UU circles: the UU7 principles and beloved community, or deep multiculturalism. She worked with congregations on these issues for over 15 years and came to realize that a person can believe they are being a good UU and following the 7 principles without thinking about or dealing with racism and other oppressions at the systemic level. Paula Cole Jones realized that an 8th principle is needed to correct this. The UU Church of Restoration in Philadelphia was the first to incorporate this principle into its covenant. That church adopted it for themselves and recommended that the UUA adopt it. We know and are so very proud that UUs and the UUA have done very good work in fighting racism, such as during the Civil Rights Movement, largely at the request of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. After the Trayvon Martin verdict, many UU ministers said nothing in church. In the late 60s, a promising movement, the Black Affairs Council and BUUC, was supported by the UUA, then defunded because of a financial crisis, leading to a terrible conflict, after which many African Americans left the UUA. One estimate was over 1,000 persons left. There was a long period of silence until the late 80s and early 90s, and then excellent progress after that for a decade or so. But UUism has regressed, leading to a fairly recent UUA president to resign over hiring inclusivity issues. This proposed 8th principle singles out racism, which would not necessarily make sense at a global level. But in the USA, in the United States of America, racism stands out. The two worst crises of the UUA, late 1960s and just a little while ago, were both related to race. Racism in the United States stems from chattel slavery, where people were uniquely, legally treated as property that could be inherited for something, skin color, they had no control over. The UUA has done well with women becoming ministers and leaders. Did you know the 7 principles themselves came out of the women's movement within UUism? The LGBTQIA plus community is well represented as members, ministers, RE staff, and other leadership in individual congregations and the UUA. Who among us remembers that the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Clemson was the first congregation in South Carolina to be certified as a welcoming congregation? That program has been very effective. Perhaps the ongoing CAPER, Clemson area prevents and erases racism, can be seen as something similar for racism. Our existing 7 principles imply this 8th principle, but do not explicitly hold us accountable for addressing these oppressions directly, especially at the systemic level. The 8th principle came from a feeling that we need something to renew our commitment to this work, to hold ourselves accountable, and to fulfill the potential of our existing principles. The UU principles were designed to be dynamic, not a fixed creed. It means we want to always continue to be educating ourselves, exploring truth, and raising consciousness. When we get to a new level of understanding and clarity, our structure makes it possible to reflect that. Unitarian Universalism is the only religion that intentionally builds in that flexibility to acknowledge the importance of ongoing revealed truth. This proposed eighth principle states, journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and in our institutions. None of the other principles mentions love. By having beloved community in the eighth principle, it brings our commitment to love higher in our consciousness. Let's begin talking about joining other UU congregations who have adopted this principle. Let's let this principle represent who the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Clemson is. Go in peace, believe in peace, create peace.